We were lucky enough to send someone to the Artemis Fowl set in the UK, and they came back. It wasn't me personally, but they came back raving about the construction of Fowl Manor and the amount of work that went into building that. And it got me wondering why you, as a director, prefer to push for the use of practical effects and sets and locations as often as possible when technology kind of makes it easier for you to just paint in what you would like to see.
Well, it makes it different. I think it's something for me. Sometimes it doesn't make it easier, but it does make it different. And sometimes it's quicker, and sometimes it's not. But I love on film particularly because if you shoot on film, you've got shorter periods of which you can shoot. You mount a magazine; it might be 10 minutes long. It isn't, the half hour, 40 minutes you might get if you're shooting on digital. So that becomes a ritual. And then if you can create in that excitement every other kind of excitement, so that the on the set it feels like. Particularly for movies like this, where you have big visual effects and things, if you can create a sense of event or about every kind of scene where where the goal is not people like me saying, so the troll's going to be 20 foot high, instead having some massive troll really chasing our real actors around the house. There's just something about what it does to the atmosphere with the actors and to the crew and everything, where maybe something that I like to retain in these film adventures is just that unexpected happening, which is there when it is not too technically dominated. It's not to say I don't revere and embrace every kind of technological advance, but if some of what you're doing is after that sort of human frailty, that human imperfection, that human excitement, sometimes mistakes, happy mistakes made when excitements are there. It comes out of them, in this case, Ferdy Shaw being taken onto the set for the first time, and like in that beautiful bookcase behind you, having him walk up to that and see that all the books in there are all the ones that he selected when we rehearsed 6 months ago. And every sort of detail of the room he already sort of owns. I saw his face light up. It was as if he was a vessel. I could have seen it being filled with more of his character. By the time that encounter with that real set, not that piece of blue screen, had really significantly affected the way he was going to play this part.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm assuming this extends to the Karnak that we'll be seeing later on this year as well, too.
Yeah. We built it, and we took people out on the water, and we went to Egypt, and we mixed up every kind of possibility. And the very first day, for me, it was important, get real actors, all 12 of them, all 12 of our leading suspects, from Miss Gadot all the way down to Miss Wright. And get them on a real boat in real water in the sunshine. It was a really great bonding thing. We were on a little launch as they went to go board the massive big Karnak, and it was already that the central thing you want to get in those kind of movies is the excitement of the holiday, of the global trip, of the great sort of travelogue movie. And we had it on day one because people were slightly scared, frankly, of falling in. That's what I'd call that kind of happy human excitement.
You can't replicate that anywhere else, that's for sure. You have familiar and very trusted faces to help you carry along the Artemis Fowl narrative, whether it be Josh Gad or Dame Judi Dench. But, the story obviously rests on the shoulders of whoever you cast as Artemis. And so I wanted to know what characteristics you were most looking for before you found Ferdy Shaw.
You needed a good thinker, someone who on screen could convey intelligence and a fast-moving mind. Artemis Fowl is quick. He has to keep up with the pace of events in a really exhilarating story where fairies, much more advanced than him technologically, have to be caught up with. So a fast thinker, someone with a permanent sense of humor, and across the 9 months that we auditioned Ferdy Shaw, amongst the other 1,200 boys that we saw in Ireland, I saw a sense of humor retained, a sense of fascination retained, wonder retained, and real passion about the books. So he felt as though with every single audition he was absorbing more. Makes films himself now. Ferdy is smart as a nut. So
really?
It felt like this guy. I mean, he was like. He was overtaking me in terms of the capacity to direct films within about a week. So I'm very, in about a year or so, I'm very much looking forward to auditioning for Ferdy as he shoots Artemis 2.
Was he shadowing you on set and absorbing as much as he could?
He was always questioning why we did things from a position of pure joy. He loved it. He loved the action part of it, so he loved joining in. Always asking questions technically about the cameras, difference between film and digital, what elements of a blue screen shot would be shot in camera, which would be elements, which would be just against blue screen itself. He was, like Lara McDonnell, who plays Holly Short. They were both very, very passionately interested in the process, as well as losing themselves as characters in the story. So it didn't detach them from what we were doing, but they were phenomenally sort of hungry, really hungry. And I've no doubt both of them. Lara, a year later, came and did her work experience with us. 2 weeks, she went through every department on Death on the Nile. So one day she was taking the stills, the next day she was doing the clapperboard. And between her and Ferdia, I mean, they know their way around a film set now with a sort of depth of knowledge that I would have killed for at that age.
Sure, what a gift. Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned getting lost in the process of it. We're a film podcast that obviously loves to get into the intricacies of the production, and there's a sequence in your film that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I just want to know if there's a trick to filming a time freeze, or if it's as simple as just having the guests at a wedding stand perfectly still for a long period of time while you move your camera through them.
Well, it's both. What we did do, we work a lot with a choreographer, Rob Ashford, both in the theater, and he did the choreography on Disney's Cinderella. For this one, a central group of our Italian villagers were fantastic dancers, and all the dancers who had to freeze to begin the visual effect from a real place were ones who were, for weeks ahead, were trained in being still in the most exaggerated positions. Plus, once we worked out what they were, we hung some of them by wires as well. But we made sure that physically the people who are going to be in the most sort of strung out kind of contortions would be dancers. So the trick was to add a really premeditated choreographic element.
That's outstanding. My name is Sean O'Connell. Obviously, my family hails from County Cork. I would be in hot water if I didn't ask why you altered the traditional Irish blessing. There's a line at the end that goes in a different direction. I was curious to get your insight.
Well, there was a straw poll taken amongst all the Irish people there, and they felt that the greatest universality would be had by the version that we have in the story. So it was with respect for the original and for all other versions of it. But that's the conclusion we came to in the 21st century.
It's amazing to hear a passage of dialogue and just, it's something that's so ingrained. Once you start to hear it, you're like, oh, it's almost like a warm, comforting blanket wrapped around you as someone who's grown up Irish.
Yeah, same here. Well, I have to say, I mean, it was on a tea towel that was hung up on our kitchen wall growing up. So I literally saw that blessing writ large on the wall of my mother's tiny kitchen. So she believed it.
Absolutely. To a certain extent, I feel that the film is a bit of a love letter to Irish storytelling as well, too. So that passion comes through in the frames. We are, as a film-going community, desperate to get back to movie theaters. And again, this podcast champions the theater-going experience. We have been holding out hope for Tenet to be the film that ushers us back. So first and foremost, please spill every secret that you can about the Nolan film. But more importantly, I want to know if it's important for you to be part of a movie that, if schedules hold, might be the first global release that issues people back.
Sean, I'm in a darkened room here because outside are Chris Nolan guards who, if I say anything untoward, they'll burst in here and they'll drag me out. They'll hang me upside down outside the Moncross Studios. I'm very proud to be part of the movie. It's a fantastic screenplay by Chris Nolan. It is all of his obsessions, all of his preoccupations. It is part of a sort of continuity that goes all the way from The Following, frankly, through Memento, definitely through Inception and Interstellar. There is a kind of engagement with time that I think is incredibly playful in the international espionage thriller genre, and he takes that to the most epic dimension, 7 continents of action. The casting is very, very strong, and it felt like the biggest movie ever being made in an auteur style, like it was a sort of cottage industry with all his key department heads doing it, really everybody up to speed, knowing this was very special. Now, of course, yes, I think everybody would love it to be the picture that we come back to the movies with, I think, because it celebrates what the boldest and bravest movie making can be. Image is designed for a big screen, designed for a communal audience to enjoy where part of the experience is the group experience to that kind of story. If ever any picture had a chance of flying back with a flag raised saying, "Isn't cinema great?" I'd like to think this one is.
As someone who's lucky enough to transition back and forth between acting and directing multiple times when you get a chance, are you still at this point, learning important lessons about how to tell stories and how to direct when you are able to work with other filmmakers?
I think learning more and more. It was a real eye opener once again to work with Chris Nolan. The first thing you engage with is the power of concentration and refinement. It seems to me that most artists, as they get older and get better, refine more. They do less. They concentrate. They make essential what it is that they do. So seeing him, I often compare him to sportsmen who can create a sense of a different time. He's on Matrix time. In the middle of a sort of sandstorm of activity and chaos. I mean, literally in Dunkirk, weather, huge boats, huge planes, a few thousand people, and somehow, if you had a dialogue moment, even a beat in a moment that involved a huge piece of action, his ability to almost create a kind of oasis of calm in that storm in order to give that moment the attention it deserved. He was going to give that moment the attention it deserved as well. But his ability to, in his own right, sort of manipulate creative and artistic time is amazing. So watching that, even just watching that, being near that, it was an inspiration. So yeah, I learn every day is a school day, no question.
You take on a device that I find to be sometimes challenging in that movies use it to their advantage and sometimes to their disadvantage, which is the use of a narrator. Josh Gad being the narrator that takes the audiences through Artemis Fowl. There's a lot of story that needs to be digested by the audience. So I'm just curious about your decision to set the structure of the film up that way and to even cut away to black and white. Why did you use black and white when you were using him as his interview?
Well, partly because we wanted to set up this other layer of sort of conspiracy that somehow he's being watched and suggesting in the audience's mind that there may be, several, layers of intrigue to uncover before you understand what the real truth is. Is he speaking in the here and now? Is he in some future? Is he in some past? And the books themselves, the very first book has an account of the Artemis Fowl story by a Professor J.A. Argon, Professor Jargon, as it were. And so that as a kind of part of Owen's use of this genre was already sort of established there, that this was in itself, it's an example of an Irish tall tale. And so the idea that you offer up a storyteller for such a tale, I think, is an important one. Particularly in tall tales, no more unreliable narrator than Mulch Diggums in the form of Josh Gad could perhaps be imagined.
I would also love to know, and I know fans of the book would like to know, the conversations that went into the creation of the Oculus when we are finally able to see it. Is it pulled directly from their narration in the book?
No, this was one of the reasons why Owen Colfer was such a great collaborator, because we, about halfway through the process of developing the script with the great Irish screenwriter, Conor McPherson, playwright and screenwriter, felt as though we needed something that was the lost ark, some totemic symbol that was the power of the fairy world, which, when in the wrong hands, could endanger both fairies and humans. And so he was the one who allowed us to have the license to go straight to the Latin name for acorn, which was very much in our vernacular. So the ways to find the name of that and the kind of thing it was, we went via his books, but he allowed that to be something which he agreed and we felt was right for a movie experience here, to give that sort of that holy grail that all the characters were looking for.
Fantastic. I'll get you out of here on this one. I know we're running out of time. If you can see over my shoulder, there are posters for the last two Avengers films. I'm a Marvel kid, and I adored what you did with Thor. I'm curious if you've kept track of his path and his evolution. And, if you put Thor Ragnarok up against your original Thor, it seems like he's grown so much. And I'm curious if you were surprised at how you could take that character, but also Chris Hemsworth, as you're responsible for sort of bringing him into the MCU, that he has the capability to stretch and grow and come up with completely different films like that.
Well, anybody who went back to the comics, as I did when I approached it, most people would see that across all the kind of story arcs they are so various. They are so extraordinary, every kind, including what we may well see in Thor 4 with Miss Portman and her possible embodiment of said superhero in female form, as per some early, recent sort of story arcs. So the materials variety was already in the DNA, but it needed people who could come and seize that opportunity. And it wasn't just filmmakers, it was also audiences. Audiences needed to be ready to go on those wild rides. And so they did. And so, Mr. Hemsworth has been able to tick the box with, Tom Hiddleston saying memorably and teasingly, it's amazing how across the Thor movies, Thor has got to look more and more like Chris Hemsworth. He said, I think that's born out of how long it took to put that blonde wig on in the first one.
Very true. Well, as a father and as the husband of an elementary school teacher, I thank you for allowing Artemis Fowl to come to Disney Plus. I know the families are really anxious to see it, and they're looking for original content, and so this is a great opportunity for them. I hope we're back in theaters by the time Nile rolls around. I know that it seems like we're wanting to see that on the biggest screen possible, and thank you so much for taking the time to join me, Mr. Branagh. And
I'm so glad to hear that about audiences. We're glad to be getting this to people at a time when the world can do with something like this as a distraction in the middle of all the noise and haste. It ain't much, but it's definitely something.
It's fantastic escapism, that's for sure. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much.